We're coming to the end of the summer break, and the drivers will be looking ahead to the rest of this year. We've seen some drivers come back on top form after the summer break in the past, such as Daniel Ricciardo last season. So what does each driver need to do to call 2022 a success? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Nicholas Latifi. Nicholas Latifi is a driver at risk. He was kept on for this season on merit after the Williams team principal Jost Capito stated that the team no longer needed his financial backing. Last year, he did well to keep himself in the sport after some strong performances through the middle part of the season. But this year, despite being in his third season in the sport, he isn't showing the same potential. There are certainly other drivers that might be stronger options for the Williams team, and so for Latifi, if he's to call this season a success, he'll need to do enough to keep his spot on the F1 grid. Following the recent antics with Oscar Piastri and Alpine, there is a chance that Latifi has a more realistic shot at keeping that seat for next year, but that remains to be seen. Alex Albon. Albon next, and I think that with the confirmation of the multi-year deal, Albon will be able to call this season a success already. Coming into this year, Albon had received a lifeline and an opportunity to build the team around him, and that seems to be what he's doing. Given he signed a multi-year deal, I'm unsure what this means for his Red Bull ties, but given Red Bull has several options to promote into AlphaTauri, I believe Albon is probably surplus to their requirements. As for the rest of Albon's season, I think if he's able to score 2 more points over the rest of the year, I think he can call the second half of the year a success. It will be a sign that Williams can recover from the worst car on the grid going into 2023. Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll next, and this driver has a guaranteed seat on the F1 grid with Aston Martin. He's also making progress with the team, but he is 12 points behind Sebastian Vettel. I think his goal for the rest of the year will be to catch up with his teammate. If he's able to close that gap down from 12 points to somewhere nearer 5, I think he can call it a success. Nobody expects Stroll to beat Vettel, but I think he should be closer if he wants to call this season a success. Either way, with a new teammate next year in Fernando Alonso, it's not going to be easy for the Canadian driver to match his teammates in the next few years, and beating Vettel over the second half will go a very long way to build that momentum. Zhou Guanyu. Zhou Guanyu next, and while Zhou's form has improved over the year, it feels like Alfa Romeo have gone backwards. As a result, Zhou is 41 points behind Bottas in the standings. It's unrealistic to expect Zhou to catch up to Bottas, but I think if he scores a few more points over the rest of the season, he could do enough to keep his spot on the F1 grid. If he secures that place on the grid next year, I think he can call this season a success. Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki Tsunoda is driving to keep hold of his F1 seat as well. It was around this point last season where his contract was extended to 2022, despite the fact that he struggled to get up to speed on the F1 grid and made many errors. Tsunoda's position in the Red Bull-owned seats is at risk given there are several Red Bull Juniors on the F2 grid. Given the fact we're in the midst of silly season, anything could happen, and AlphaTauri could even look outside of the Red Bull Junior team for a new driver. So, with Tsunoda's seat not confirmed for 2023, I think his focus must be to stay on the grid for next year. His season so far is significantly improved compared to last year in my opinion, and he scored 3-point scoring finishes so far. Going into the last 9 rounds, he needs more consistent points to keep his spot on the grid. Mick Schumacher. Mick Schumacher's form going into the summer break with points at Silverstone and the Red Bull Ring has given the German driver momentum. His position at Haas and in the Ferrari Academy looked to be at risk, given many gave him the benefit of the doubt after a difficult and pointless debut season. This year, with Kevin Magnussen delivering for Haas from the off, Schumacher had to catch up to the standard of Formula 1 very quickly. I think his performances going into the summer break have given him a good chance of holding on to his seat at Haas. And that's exactly what he needs to do, keep hold of his seat. He was rumoured by various F1 outlets to be potentially in a position to replace Vettel at Aston Martin, but realistically he needs to stay with Haas if he wants a seat on the grid in the long run, in my opinion. Sebastian Vettel. Vettel is embarking on his final 9 races in Formula 1. After a hugely successful career, he's leaving the sport, so it's difficult to say that Vettel needs to change anything to call 2022 a success. For me, I think Vettel just needs to enjoy these last 9 rounds. If he can score points in those races, then that's a bonus. I think what Vettel does next with his life will be fascinating. I believe he could become a commentator or broadcaster, or even move into team management, and alongside that, continue his campaigning to make the world a better place. Whatever happens, I think this year's a success already. Pierre Gasly. Pierre Gasly is a driver that's seemingly struggling in 2022 compared to previous seasons. In 2020 and in 2021, he thrived in the AlphaTauri setup, and at the time he looked like he'd recovered his F1 career and would soon be picked up by another outfit. But this hasn't yet happened, and based on his performances in 2022, I fear it's getting less likely. Yes, Gasly's car is much worse this season relative to the others in the midfield, but I think going into the second half, Gasly needs to find his form again. In 2023, he has a confirmed seat with AlphaTauri once again, and I think if he's able to start leading that team, he'll allow them to recover in the next few years. Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo's summer didn't exactly get off to a great start. The driver has a contract for 2023, but it seems like he's potentially lost that McLaren seat to a rookie driver. Last year, when Ricciardo had a tough start to his McLaren career, he delivered after the summer break, with that win in Monza. For me, to call this year a success, Ricciardo needs to prove McLaren wrong and come back stronger. Since leaving Renault for McLaren, Ricciardo's F1 career has gone downhill, and I think the Australian driver can call this year a success if he's able to match Norris over these last 9 rounds and secure himself a seat with another team on the grid, or stay with McLaren. Kevin Magnussen. Magnussen got a lifeline to return to Formula 1 and managed to secure a multi-year deal with Haas. His season has gone well this year already, and he hit the ground running at the first race in Bahrain. I would say this year is already a success for Magnussen, and he's done well to even return to the sport. But for me, if he wants to build on that in the last 9 rounds, I think he'll need to lead the team to 7th in the standings, as that would mean the team have shown their true potential in this new aerodynamic era. Before we get into the top 10 drivers, I want to take a moment to ask you to consider subscribing to Behind the Drive. According to YouTube, 70% of you watching haven't yet subscribed, so please make sure you hit that button if you're enjoying the videos and can't wait for the season to get back underway. Fernando Alonso. Alonso is a driver that struggled with some bad luck in the early stages this year. He's made a move to Aston Martin for next year already, but I think he needs to outscore Esteban Ocon if he wants to prove people wrong and show that he really should and could have beaten his teammate over the course of this season had the luck gone the other way. This may be a challenge, given Alpine will certainly be giving Ocon preferential treatment in these last few races after Alonso didn't even let his current team know that he's signed a contract with a new team for 2023. But Alonso has the skill, and so he needs to show that again to call this year a success. Valtteri Bottas. Bottas is a driver that was the best of the rest for a large part of the first half of the year. He settled into the Alfa Romeo team well, and I think he can call this season and his move to a new team a success this year already. For the rest of the year, I think Bottas needs to continue trying to fight for the best of the rest spots. Given the Finnish driver hit the ground running early on this year, he maximised the points available to him. But now the team is falling back, Bottas needs to try and find a way to keep scoring some points whenever the car allows. Esteban Ocon. Esteban Ocon is a driver that might be forced into becoming a lead driver next year. This season he's showing that he can be Mr. Consistent. I've seen people commenting that they barely notice Ocon in the races, and yet he's only failed to score points on 3 occasions so far this year. Not only this, but those point scoring finishes are more often 6th and 7th than 9th and 10th, which means he's scoring more and more points for Alpine. If Ocon can keep up these performances, then this year will certainly be a success. He's on track to lead Alpine in the fight for the best of the rest spot in the Constructors' Championship, which is exactly what he needs to do. Lando Norris. Norris next, and he's the only driver outside the top 3 teams to have scored a podium so far in 2022. Much like Ocon, Norris is delivering exactly what he needs to do, and therefore I think Norris needs to keep getting those point-scoring finishes and delivering the solid points for McLaren to secure 4th in the standings for the team, and the best of the rest of 7th in the drivers' standings to then call this season a success. Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton next, and for me, I think Hamilton's priority needs to be to beat his teammate. There are many rumours to say why Hamilton's behind Russell to this point in the season, but in the latter stages of the first half, it was the 7-time champion that had the upper hand. If Hamilton is able to silence the comments regarding him versus Russell, I think he can call the season a success. Already Hamilton's achieved a lot this season, and he's supported the team to improve their performance and start to catch up with their rivals. So it's not necessarily the only thing he could do to call this year a success, but I think beating Russell would be a good achievement to establish himself as the lead driver. Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz is a really tricky one for this list. He's probably out of championship contention, but that's partly down to the Ferrari power unit's poor reliability. For me though, if Sainz is able to beat Perez this season, he can call the year a success from this point. It's not what he would have wanted going in at the start of the season. That's the way things stand at this point in the year for Sainz. George Russell. Russell is a driver that's shown a huge amount of potential this year. He's capable of competing at the front and has shown some impressive consistency throughout the year so far. Russell has achieved 5 podiums so far in 2022, but with Mercedes on the rise, I think Russell can call this season a success if he's able to win one of these final 9. He's been knocking on the door this year, and that pole position in Hungary is definitely one that will be motivating him to take it one step further. Winning a race would cement Russell as the future of the Mercedes team. This year, he's done exactly what he needed to do, and he'll build on this season, particularly if he gets a race win under his belt. Sergio Pérez. Sergio Pérez next, and the Red Bull driver has had a season of ups and downs. Early on he looked brilliant, but as the season's gone on he's had some races where he's just been too far back. So for me to call the year a success for himself, Pérez needs to be more consistent through those last few races. Where possible, when Verstappen is showing the true capability of the Red Bull car, I think Pérez needs to be right up there with him. With both championships looking pretty secure for Red Bull and Verstappen, the spotlight will be on Pérez to finish in the top 3 in the championship standings this year. Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc next, and like Sainz, this is a tricky one to call. Ideally, I think Leclerc would want to win the title, and I'm sure he's still aiming to do that. But it's looking less likely given the current state of the Drivers' Championship. So for me, one of the key areas for Charles Leclerc to develop based on this season so far has been his ability to have a holistic view of the races. The best drivers in the world know when to listen to their teams and when to make different strategy calls, and that's something that Leclerc can develop in these last 9 rounds. Ferrari is giving Leclerc a car that can score pole positions, and now the team and driver will want to give it their all to win every single race possible. If Leclerc can start seeing the strategies play out ahead of him, and then he might have something to build on for 2023, and may even be able to say the learnings he had from this year were a success. Max Verstappen. And then, much like the team version of this video, the only thing Verstappen needs to do to call 2022 a success is to secure his 2nd World Championship. For him and the Red Bull team to go back-to-back in the Drivers' Championship through the largest aerodynamic change in 40 years, whilst also managing the change under a budget cap, would be incredibly impressive. So those are the one thing every driver must do to call 2022 a success. If you want to see what each team needs to do, then watch this video next.